welcome everybody. It usually takes like a minute or two for everyone's screen to come on and for audio to get connected. Good to see some faces that we've seen the last couple of weeks. Welcome back, everybody. It's a good looking crowd. Brady Bunch screen is really popping today. Love it. Let's see. I think it looks like I don't see any more connecting to audio. So I think we are good to go. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome to our third of 3 Thursdays, our final Thursday. This has been such fun for us to hear from all of you and fun to hear the excitement about what we have developing at Macmillan. So welcome back. Today's topic is engaging and retaining students with Achieve and activities. One of my favorite topics, because I just am excited about the different things that we have in development. And first, of course, I'm going to share my screen. And apologies for those of you who saw this the last couple of weeks, but I feel like it's always just the due diligence of the host to explain the logistics, and that's that we mute everyone upon entry, and that's just to cut down on the background noise. But if you'd like to chime in, please feel free to unmute, or you can use the chat function also. We're recording portions of this, and we're going to send some follow-up emails after today with the resources from all 3 Thursdays and some of the clips of the presentations. These are the functions that you'll need in the Zoom: controlling your audio with the join audio button, controlling your video if you want to turn your camera on or off. The chat is where you can communicate with us if you don't want to turn your audio on, so you can put some questions or comments in there. And then there's that great live transcript function from Zoom. And today's conversations are going to be with our wonderful authors, David Myers and Nathan DeWall, editors, Christine Bruni and Carly Stembridge. I'm Kate Nuri. I'm just doing the intro part. And then Elizabeth, who some of you met her last week, is going to walk us through a couple of activities later on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carlise. And while she is kind of giving a preview of the session, everyone can just enter your name and where you're from in the chat and give a little introduction. And that'd be great.
Super. All right. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Like Kate said, my name is Carly Stembridge. If you weren't here before, this Thursday, I am the program manager for Dave and Nathan's titles. So I work on all aspects of the text and the Launchpad Now Achieve course. And so today we're really excited to wrap up these 3 Thursdays talking about engaging and retaining students with activities. So as you know, engagement and retention have always been part of the Myers DeWall text. And we think it's super important that also matches what we do with activities. And so we're going to talk about how you engage and retain your students with activities. And then we're going to show Dave and Nathan, along with Elizabeth, our learning solutions specialist, which I'm sure many of you have worked with, are going to go through a couple of activities that you are familiar with, and then also a new one that Dave and Nathan created. So while we're in the chat, while you're in there, I'm just curious, thinking about how you integrate activities into your course. Let us know in the chat, how are you teaching this semester? Were you online? Were you in person? Were you hybrid? If you were online, if you're synchronous or asynchronous, would just love to get a sample of how everybody was teaching this semester. So I'll let you type that into the chat. Online, synchronous. And thank you to everybody who completed the survey this week. We asked a lot about activities and how you engage your students with activities in your classroom. And I was just thinking too about like retention and thinking about the value that activities play, right, and helping to, yes, engage students, but also to help them retain that content. So I even know from my own kids that sometimes they'll say, I wasn't really getting that concept. And then we, did something in class or the simulation or did an activity online and like, oh, the light bulb went off. So want to talk to you about that. So let's see, I'm just opening the chat. Is there any kind of consensus on how everybody taught this fall? A little bit of everything. Okay. Why don't we share, thinking about engaging students, I was reading the survey feedback and anybody who want to weigh in, it was everything from videos to demonstrations to case studies, lots of discussions, discussion prompts. I loved how some people said, my enthusiasm, right? That's how I'm engaging students. A lot of applying concepts to their everyday lives. That's another way that you're trying to engage them. Anybody want to share kind of their tried and true, what really worked for them this fall? I'm going to, like Kate said, tomorrow, compile everything. I know for the people who were there 3 weeks ago for the DEI conversation, I will be sending you that feedback, but I was just thought I'll do it in one email tomorrow instead of, sending separate ones. But we can also share some of this feedback. I cannot believe the wide range. I mean, some people hybrid, in-person, asynchronous, synchronous. Some people are doing both. Anybody have any thoughts about all of that and, how your teaching had to change with one of those new environments? There's a lot of great stuff going into the chat. I know you're all looking at it, but, keep that going. I did want to make sure, because we haven't really talked to Dave and Nathan so much the first 2 weeks, but I did want to have them go through a few elements of Achieve that that you may be aware of. And I would love to get some reactions from folks if you want to raise a hand or whatever kind of a reaction at the bottom of the Zoom. Have you seen or assigned the How Would You Know research activities in Launchpad? If you have, let me see that. The reason why I mentioned that is they've been in Achieve, but for example, the 3 semesters of beta testers I talked about last week with Achieve, I was surprised folks who've been using Myers-DeWall for a while had never looked at a How Would You Know activity. And so we want to just quickly go through that. The other activity, Assess Your Strengths, is another activity. The first one I mentioned is written by Dave and Nathan, along with Assess Your Strengths, which are designed to, a lot of you said, try to apply psychological science to everyday lives, and that's the goal of Assess Your Strengths. And these are also great for asynchronous online activities. You can assign these and let them go ahead and do them at any time. So we're going to just quickly show you Assess Your Strengths, and then a new element for Achieve. It's a functionality that was available with the other Achieve courses in chemistry, physics, etc. We are, before Dave shows that, I'll give you a little more context for that. But why don't we pass the ball to Elizabeth, and she and Nathan are kind of walk through a couple of those activities, and not through the whole thing because we don't have time for that, but just to give you a sense of what those are all about. So I think Elizabeth is here and Nathan. The other thing I wanted to mention while they're getting oriented is videos. Almost a lot of you, not everybody, but mentioned videos as a great way to engage students. And I just wanted to let you know that we have a brand new video collection that will be available with Achieve, about a little over 120 new clips across the course, a lot of them with DEI as a focus. So just very diverse, modern, up-to-date videos that I'm excited for you to see and Achieve. And they will also have assessment. So you could use them synchronously in class to show them to your students, or if you wanted to assign them, they all have multiple choice questions, 3 to 5 questions. So you can assign it and it can go into your grade book. So just a little info about videos, because I know a lot of you mentioned that. What else? Are you ready to go, Elizabeth?
Yep. So Nathan, do you want to start with How Would You Know or Assess Your Strengths? I'll let you pick.
How would you know? They're both great. We can start with How Would You Know?
All right, perfect.
And I can just, if you want, I can just give you, now, like I'm already starting to talk with my hands. So like that picture of me is very accurate. So How Would You Know really came about because we wanted to, research is so fun. And my experience is that students don't really know what research is. So we kind of talk about it in the intro in very abstract terms, like researchers show this and why it's important to think about research. But my experience is that the students, they kind of think that ideas fall out of the clouds. And what we wanted to do is to give students the ability to really think like a researcher, even though they haven't done, and most of them never will go beyond intro to psych. to take research methods and statistics. So we designed these. I don't know if in the chat, if you could talk about if you ever read Choose Your Own Adventure books. I used to be addicted to those, or I used to read a lot of those as a child. And so it would sort of give you, you read up to a certain point and then you can go this way or this other way. I sort of designed, I think of research as in a similar sort of way, where you start with a question that's really interesting to you. For example, how do you know if there's a hot hand in basketball? And then there are ways that you can really try to answer that question using different research methods. And so research, we don't have a research methods chapter in our book. The entire book is a research methods sort of compendium. But in the first chapter, this is actually one of the more popular ones. How do you know if there's a hot hand in basketball? And so, Elizabeth, do you want to show them maybe just a brief, you can click on, so all of them begin with a video of either Dave or myself kind of introducing the topic. And then you can go beyond there. And students they get some more background, but then they're talking about what's the best research design that you want to use. Okay. And so we can go on.
So for this one, I actually have to click through it. It's not like in Launchpad where I can just go through. So I'll choose correctly so we can move forward.
Elizabeth, could you make it a little bit larger?
I will try. Is that better?
Yeah.
Doug,
so now what we're going to do is, so we pick the design, then we pick the participants. So what's the best group of participants to use? We go forward. And then, how are we going to measure this so that now we're getting to operational definitions and things like that. And so it kind of works them all the way through. Now we're to dependent variables. And so all of these sorts of things and are things that we can include. And if you see, there are video hints that try to get at confounding variables. And here we have an illustrated type of thing that can take students through what is a confound. All right, so we can go next. All right, so basically, I think all of this really shows us how it's a very good way to illustrate to students how researchers actually do research. And the good thing about this, if you're teaching synchronously or asynchronously, if you're teaching in person or face-to-face, you can still incorporate this. So I've got experience teaching in all of those different formats. The first online class that I taught was asynchronous. And so the good thing about Achieve, in my experience, and I've used Launchpad extensively before this, is that there are so many things that I can include, and it doesn't really matter the format in which I'm teaching. So there's a lot of that flexibility, which I really like. Okay, so if we could get to the end of this, what we can do is now, one thing that I want to do and that the students pretty much demand, this is one of my biggest surprises when I started teaching a long time ago, was how much students like to be quizzed on things. And so we have assessments here that go straight into the gradebook. And so not only are we giving students this activity that sort of trains their mind to think like a researcher, and there are these in each chapter, but there's also, it also serves as an assessment vehicle. And there are so many different sort of interesting questions that we have throughout the text. We have a popular one that students really like is, how do you know if having kids predicts greater happiness? So that, that's a common question. I don't know if any of you have gotten that question when you teach intro to psych. If you want to be happier, should we just have more kids? And that's a very good example, because that's something where you can't use an experimental design to do that. You can't randomly assign people to be parents or not parents, but you can still really look at these interesting questions.
Well, this is good. Elizabeth is showing right now in Achieve all the different how would you know. So like Nathan said, there's one per chapter, and they are a little more involved. That's why we're not going all the way to the end, and you can take it branches in different directions based on how you answer it. So I know a woman who she assigns one in every chapter. She loves these. I know some people who, assign a couple of them because they're a little more detailed, but like you said, they really kind of put that spotlight on research and giving students experience to act in the role of a researcher. Anybody have any questions for Nathan about the activity? Or anybody use it, like it? Any feedback from your students?
You know how when your rep is giving you access to whichever product you're using from electronic product from Macmillan, you'll get an email saying, hey, your access is ready or your course is ready. So for everyone here, we'll do the same thing with the Exploring 12E Achieve course. And those emails giving you access are going to go out right around January 25th. So we'll make sure all of you get access so you can look for it on January 25th. And then it's not meant to be adopted and for sale for students to purchase until like July, so in time for fall classes. But you'll have access for those of you, most of you are using Launchpad already, I think, in some shape. You have plenty of time to prepare for using Exploring Achieve for fall.
So I will say, last thing I was saying with the beta testers, every week the beta testers are asked, what was your favorite thing about Achieve? And a lot of times people would say the how would you know activity. So if you haven't tried them before, definitely take a look. The next one I want to talk about is Assess Your Strengths, which again, I don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand in the chat to say if you've used these before, but again, these were written by Dave and Nathan. And so Nathan, do you want to give a little bit of backstory about why this activity? Why did you?
Yes, I'll be very brief about it. So I remember when I took my first psychology class, we used the David Myers textbook. And I took that class so that I could learn about myself, because I was this 18-year-old and I wanted to know about myself, and I wanted to know about my relationships, and I wanted to be a better global citizen. So I took Intro to Psychology. We used Dave's text, and my life has changed forever. I changed my majors to psychology. Now I'm a co-author of the book. So that's my life in a nutshell. And so what we wanted to do is kind of give students what they wanted in terms of a lot of them take Intro to Psych because they want to know about themselves. And students, in my experience, they love to do these activities. They love to complete online, scientifically validated surveys that give them information about who they are and how they can become better human beings and better global citizens. And that's what Assess Your Strengths does. And it uses questions that students are interested in, like sleep. So how do you know if you're sleep deprived? Well, you could just ask people, are you or aren't you? But there are lots of other ways that we can get at that. And so each one of these videos has, again, another introduction that we tape, that's either Dave or myself. And then if we go to the next screen, then we go to Test Yourself. And they complete, questions from a validated instrument to measure their, in this case, how much they're getting in terms of their sleep.
And I'll try to click through this quickly.
All right.
I see Andrea made a comment about her students loving these Assess Your Strengths. Because don't we all love to learn about ourselves and take quizzes and assessments? So that's great to hear.
We're wrapping up the 6th edition of Psychology in Everyday Life right now. And we have a little bit of a shout out to your institution, College of Southern Nevada. So keep an eye out for that. But anyway, so here we're getting, so students get their score, And then we give them some validated, ways that they can build on their strength. And then we quiz them. So we have another to assess.
So, go ahead.
So I would love to hear about your thoughts about assess your strengths. If you've used it, online if you're teaching online, synchronous or asynchronous, or face to face, or any other questions you might have about it.
Someone asked about topics. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you want to go to the table of contents just to show some of the other strengths we're assessing.
Yeah, so I know it's hard to see some of them. I'll hover over them so you can see the full question.
Yeah, so students like to talk about relationships, self-control, all of these life satisfaction, sort of like positive psychology. What's your self-concept? All of these sorts of things, resiliency. And these are topics that I think the reason why we really chose them is that they aren't stuck in time. So they're just as important today as they likely will be in 5 or 10 years. Students constantly want to know about these things.
Yeah, I see some great feedback in the chat. Keep it going. People are asking questions, how many points, et cetera. Michael's giving some good feedback. So those have been moved from Launchpad to Achieve. And again, focusing on that critical thinking and like Andrew said, like really trying to apply all of the psychological science to their lives, which is so important to help with engaging and retaining. So the other thing I was going to say is we're going to move to, thank you, Nathan. We're going to move to the new element that's in Achieve. It is called Instructor Activity Guides. And these were built into the Achieve course to really give you kind of a recipe card for how to go through an activity in your class. So there's Dave will show how he wrote them, but each of these activities in the Instructor Activity Guides were taken from the Instructor Resource Manual. I don't know how many of you over the years have looked at the Instructor's Resource Manual, but good news with Exploring, we have organized it, tweaked it, took out some of the activities that were a little bit dated, reorganized things to make it easier to find. So if you're looking for a pair activity, you can see that easily. If you're looking for group, we also worked with Liz Hammer. She tagged everything to the new IPI themes. So if you're like, I want to make sure I hit, the third theme in this chapter, you can find those easily. So, and then also, I think Selena's on this call. I think we gave her a shout out during the first session because she created some really cool, diverse activities. A lot of them were related to women and psychology. So I just think you'll see the Instructor's Resource Manual and be pleased with how we've updated it with Exploring. And that can be found in the resources. So back to Dave, we asked Dave and Nathan to look in the Instructor's Resource Manual that they've been familiar with for years and pick out an activity from every chapter that could lend itself to this new functionality called the Instructor's Activity Guide. So let's see, is Nathan or Dave, are you going to share your screen? Or do you want Elizabeth just to point it out on her course?
Yeah, I can share mine again if you need to or need me to.
Dave's on mute.
Oh.
But yet, we still can't hear you, Dave.
He had a little trouble with his audio earlier.
That's true.
Sounds like that's the problem.
He will figure it out. I have no doubt. No, we still can't hear you. He's smiling. He will figure it out. I'm not worried about that. But so basically, pick an activity from every chapter that's kind of a winner and put it into this format that it makes it easy for you to conduct this activity in class. So this was designed, could be something you do in class, synchronously or asynchronously. And let's see, where is Dave? Is he on yet?
And each one has the same format too, so that you can just grab them quickly if you don't have a lot of time. You don't have to sift through a new format for each one. Incidentally, the whole instructor's manual is set up that way now too, so it's simpler to go through.
Say,
Yeah.
can you see my screen now?
Yes, and we can hear you.
Okay, so I click on Instructor's Resources and go to Chapter 1, and I can click down to, oops, I lost my instructor and activity guide here now. I was going to show you the what it looks like in the exercise, but let me go straight to the demonstration itself, because this is what you access from it. This is a demonstration. It's one of my favorites. It's of the hindsight bias, also called the "I knew it all along" phenomenon, which is a demonstration I developed based on the research, and that I've used several dozen times in the first introductory psych class period, and it always works dramatically, memorably well. And so what the instructor's activity guide does is give instructions as to how to prepare for it, what you need to do to discuss with the class in advance of doing it, how much time it's going to take, and then the resources for actually doing it. So for this demonstration of the I knew it all along phenomenon, which of course is the tendency for any historical or social or research outcome to seem, after the outcome is known, like obvious common sense, the procedure is simple. What you do is just take the sheet. If you're doing this in class, if you're doing it online, obviously you're going to have to use a different technology. If you have 40 students, make 20 copies of this, cut them in half, alternate the two half sheets, and then distribute them to the class. And so the students will get two opposite findings. One, asking them to explain the result that most people, whether choosing friends or falling in love, are more attracted to people whose traits are similar to their own. After all, birds of a feather flock together. Or they're given the opposite finding, that opposites attract. Whichever finding they're given, they're asked to explain it in a sentence or two. And everybody's able to do that, to come up with an explanation of why that's true. And then they're asked a simple question: does this finding strike you as surprising or unsurprising? So after each person has played psychologist, I ask them to raise their hands and tell me whether or not they find it surprising or unsurprising. How many find it surprising? Out of 40 students, there might be 3 hands go up. How many find it not surprising? Everybody else, like 95%. And I say that's really interesting, because if you'll compare with the person on either side of you, you'll see that the two of you were given exactly opposite findings. And they compare, they see that difference, and then the class just breaks down in groaning and laughter. And I explained that social psychologists have actually found virtually no evidence for opposites attract. Maybe a sadist and a masochist, but on the whole, the research supports very well the birds of a feather finding that similarity leads to attraction. But I remind them, hey, don't get too smug. If you got the birds of a feather version, looking at the dork on either side of you, that, oh, they thought opposites attract. Because what I've just demonstrated is that, have I given you the opposite finding, you would have told me that was unsurprising common sense. So what's the lesson? The lesson is that whether judging coaching the day after the game, or the campaigning the day after the election, or a research study that you're going to read about in this course, once you know the result, there's an irresistible tendency after the fact to see whatever outcome obtains as inevitable common sense. That's the hindsight bias, the I knew it all along phenomenon. And it's a phenomenon worth remembering as you read about research and explain events in your life for as long as you live. So anyway, that's just one idea of a very simple demonstration that works powerfully and memorably well. And there are, 1 or 2 of these for every chapter in the book in the new version of Achieve. Sorry, I had trouble getting my screen to show.
Yeah, can you open up that activity so we can see it? We can't really see that, or if you can't.
I am screen sharing. So if you're not seeing it, then you're not allowing my screen, I guess.
We can see your screen, but we don't see the instructor activity guide. We don't see the actual activity.
Okay, the activity is showing on my screen, and my screen says I'm screen sharing. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But by the way, I have this demonstration and a few others as a handout, as a PDF I can send to anybody who's interested, so they can have it immediately without waiting for Achieve too.
Yeah, you can send it, give it to me, Dave, and then I can send it over tomorrow when I send everything else.
Sorry, you
So-
couldn't see it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Elizabeth, can you just show on your screen, just want to show the format. Like Dave said, what Dave and Nathan wrote for these activities is we wanted to keep them short. Some activities, you don't have 20 minutes of class to do these. So most of them are what, probably 5 minutes or less, would you say, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're short. And so thank you for going to, so the first one is there. Bruce said, please send us a PDF. So here you can see the layout. Everybody see that it's like a recipe card. Like Christine said, they're all set up the same way. You can see what kind of classroom it's best for, how long it's going to take. There's a pre-work part, and then there's a part in your class. There's also iClicker questions that Dave wrote that you can use. So yeah, right there. And then to download the resource would be that resource that Dave just talked about. So anyway, they're all set up. It's really step-by-step. You are all probably master teachers and may not need this step-up format for every activity, but this really makes it seamless and kind of error-proof to try these out in class. So again, this is a new functionality we're going to achieve. Any beta testers on the call that have tried these, or anybody have any thoughts about this new activity type? Molly loves the consistent format. Yep, great. So what do how many of them, we chose, a good question. Dave and Nathan chose activities that could be by and large asynchronous. I don't know the proportion. I don't know, Dave or Nathan, can you think of, like the one Dave just talked about is obviously great in a synchronous format, or you could have them, talk about it outside of class. Anybody have any thoughts on the asynchronous versus synchronous part?
There are notes, I think, for all of these that give instructions for how to do it asynchronously or synchronously, and then face-to-face or online, depending on the format. So there's suggestions about how to alter according to the format you're teaching in.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Christine. So the good thing is, again, the whole point of these 3 activities is to show you that what we focus on, research, critical thinking, applying to everyday life in the book is reflected in Launchpad and Now Achieve. And having Dave and Nathan author these activities is just so awesome because it's in their voice. It matches the text perfectly. So I just want to thank Dave and Nathan. Not all authors are as engaged in the digital assets. So just big thanks to them for investing in this technology. So one other thing I was going to say about engaging, a lot of you mentioned discussion as well, how you're engaging your students in your classrooms. And I don't know how many of you, I don't know if you've ever accessed Dave's blog, the TalkPsych blog. Anybody raise their hand? But that's where Dave writes blog posts. What is it, Dave? Like every other week on timely topics that are perfect for discussion. Anybody have ever used those TalkPsych topics in class? Let's see, looking in the chat, anybody? The blogs are great for discussion. What's your latest? It looks like, what's your latest topic, Dave?
The latest topic that just was posted yesterday applies psychological science to an interesting question that is faced by some charitable foundations, and that is, to what extent should they prioritize giving now versus giving in the future? And there's been some effort to force foundations to spend down their resources because of current needs. And so I don't decide, I don't give an answer to this question, but I just give the arguments on both sides and apply some psychological concepts like time discounting, delay of gratification, and so forth, time perspective to how one answers the question, if you have a lot of money, should you give it away now or give it away? Does the future matter as much as the present? That's just today's.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the next one is, I think, maybe for psych instructors, going to be even more interesting. And it's an essay on how experiences of failure that we all have as teachers and as scholars, if we're doing research or writing too, is something we keep to ourselves. And so it's a discussion of whether there's some merit in being more public about our failures as well as our successes. and how failures often precede success. And it'll give some examples that I think will be heartwarming to teachers.
We just today, Dave, had someone ask about someone who is, I think they're in Louisiana, maybe, asking about how to talk about the replication crisis with the intro psych. And I was able to look at this. I scrolled back and just a few months ago, right there, sent them that article.
Yeah, that article got it. And by the way, these are all on TalkPsych.com. That article got a really, really good response.
Yeah, that was good, Kate. You just pulled it right out of the TalkPsych blog.
Is that where you would find the blog?
Yes, you can go to our community page and then TalkPsych.com, right?
Yeah, but it's easier if you just type in TalkPsych.com, and that'll take you to the community page that has the blog.
Yeah. Any other, I know we need to wrap up a little bit early. We have 6 minutes. And so I wanted to leave time for anyone. There's so many great comments in the chat. Anybody have anything else they want to share about how they're engaging students with activities, or any questions for Dave or Nathan? The floor is open.
One quick thing that I wanted to include as well is, I don't know if people are APS members. You don't actually have to be an APS member to get access to the teaching current directions column that Dave and I have written for APS for along with Cindy Mae, Michael Scull, and Matt Morling. I just put a link to it in the chat, and anybody can get to any of those columns. And really, a lot of those, each column has a teaching activity in it. And so if you ever want to use those, feel free to use them.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, anybody see the Observer articles? They're about teaching. They're great. Thank you for putting the link in there. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions for your colleagues? Challenges you want to share?
This has been a really active chat too, Carlise.
Yes, I know.
Like comments flying. So
the impetus were these blogs, and that was part of, right, the textbook comes out every few years, and these blogs really, these essays really, just like you said, timely application, like every week, every day, right? Isn't there a way to apply psychological science to what's happening in the news? So thank you, Dave, for doing that. Also, people are asking about costs and prices, and definitely stay in touch with us. We definitely are looking at students and the market and needs and trying to provide these resources at more affordable pricing. We do have some really affordable digital pricing that allows you to still get access to our interactive ebook along with these activities. We still provide print. I know some publishers aren't doing that. Some students like print. We have affordable loose leaf options. So yes, we do have affordable ebooks. So we definitely are listening to the market and are trying to provide still the highest quality. Like Dave and Nathan, like that's what they do, is provide the most up-to-date, high quality content. But we do realize we have to provide affordable formats. So please do talk to your rep or call me or talk to me. We can talk more about that. Any other thoughts? We want to wrap up in 2 minutes. Like Kate said, my goal is, before we have the whole week off next week, I'm going to try to get an email out to everybody who attended the 3 sessions and give you some of these resources, like Liz Hammer's activity from week 1, the DEI content. So look for an email from me with some of those handouts. Nobody likes loose leaf. I think Carol doesn't like loose leaf. Lots of good stuff in the chat. Any parting thoughts, Dave and Nathan, anybody, before we end in 2 minutes?
I just want to thank everybody and I'm so impressed that you have taken an hour out of your day, and many of you on 3 different occasions, because of your commitment to the teaching of psychology. And it's, for many of you, such a huge privilege for us to assist your teaching. We regard ourselves as your teaching assistants. So thank you for that privilege, and thanks for being with us these Thursdays, I mean.